I want to share with you again that Cinderella Diaries is where I share with you my stories and the stories of women, a lot like myself and a lot like you, who made the deliberate choice to step out of the fairy tale and to deliberately create the life of their dreams, to walk in that and to live in that and to create that experience. Welcome wherever you happen to be viewing from, and thank you for joining us. Today's Cinderella Diary entry is actually not my personal story. It's a story that I have been privileged enough to have shared with me. And it's one that I was so inspired by myself that I wanted to share it with you. I will call our Cinderella today Jane. This person, Jane, is, of course, it's not her real name, but Jane is the closest I've ever come to actually knowing a real life Cinderella. And her story is so humble, so inspiring, and yet so without rancor, without any bitterness. Because the life experience she had certainly entitled her to be angry and mad and resentful. Certainly the bitterness would be warranted, but in her case, she has chosen otherwise. So she has many, many different ways of measuring the wealth that she acquired as a result of her choices. But let's get to the heart of the story. So um, Jane is one of three children, and she's the middle child in this scenario. For whatever reason, for whatever combination of circumstances, Jane seemed in her biological family, this was not a stepmother situation, in her biological family, Jane seemed to have just pulled the worst end of the stick. And in her sharing this with me, she didn't share every detail, because even as she's sharing it, she's you could see the pain, and you can see that she's struggling to not be engulfed by the trauma of what her experience was. But Jane definitely had difficulty growing up, being dealt with as the least appreciated, least wanted part of the family. And as a result, not only was Jane the one who had to do all the chores, she was the one who literally had to make everything happen. Hey there, hi. Not only was Jane the one that had to make everything happen, but she was the one who was, it was almost as if she was raising the other children. I don't know, I'm sharing this because even in her telling me this story, I don't understand how to connect the dots of what was actually going on. Jane was the literal, real life Cinderella. So I remember her sharing, having difficulties at school because she had to take care of all these chores from the time she got home from school. When she woke up in the morning, she had to deal with all these chores before she could go to school, and being punished by her teachers because she didn't do her homework. I remember her sharing how when on her way to school, she would find a spot where she would sit and quickly try to scribble in her homework, only to be scolded by the teachers for being late, but they had no idea what was going on. This Cinderella really had a rough time. And it's one of those things where you don't think these things happen, but they do. You think families are cohesive, that everything's going well, and that everybody loves each other. That was not her situation. And it really had me wondering how many other Cinderellas in real life were dealing with those scenarios in their blood family relations. Needless to say, Jane had a difficult time growing up. She had few friends, but some of her friends understood and were able to give her support and able to help her get through it. The reason why I am sharing this Cinderella story with you is because of some choices Jane made along the way. And again, this is not my story. This has been told to me, and I'm sharing with you. Imagine being that person. Imagine being the person who you have no love or very little, if any, coming your way. You didn't have the opportunity to be a child because of the responsibilities that you had to deal with. You really didn't have the opportunities to have fun. You didn't have the opportunities to be supported with education. No one was going to come to school and fight for you if there was anything that happened. No one was going to go to the teacher and say, "How is my daughter doing in school? What can we do to?" So none of that was available to Jane. And in everything that she was going through, in everything that she was going through, Jane knew that she needed something different for herself. And when Jane had the opportunity to make some choices, she made some tough ones. And considering what she'd come out of, I tip my hat to Jane, because the person she is now bears no resemblance to the start she had in life. Here are some of the choices that Jane had to make. One, she had to decide to change how she was thinking. I remember sitting down and having Jane say to me, "Poverty makes people ignorant." I'll say that again. Poverty makes people ignorant. And by ignorant, I'm not talking about a lack of knowledge. I'm talking about that way of thinking where you have no arguments, you talk nonsense, you know, the way you think, everyone's up against you and all that. You're ready to swallow everybody or anybody that says anything to you. Poverty makes you ignorant. And because of the poverty that she dealt with, did I share with you that Jane was tragically poor through all of this? Um, because of everything that she'd gone through, she had to choose to think differently. And that came in time. I remember sitting there and laughing at some of the things she shared with me to illustrate the ignorant mindset that she had, and that she had grown with, that she had to grow out of. The way she was thinking was different. And as she got older, she identified that and was able to make a choice to think differently. It's amazing to me that when I think one of the things I learned in hearing Jane relate this story is that sometimes we have to ask ourselves, why are they doing what they're doing? Why is she saying what she's saying? I think it's Oprah with a co-author who has this book, What Happened to You? And it's such a precious question to ask if we're going to deal with each other with love and support. What happened to you? In this case, Jane made the deliberate decision to not let what happened to her determine what her future was going to be. She changed her mindset from poverty and that ignorant attitude to abundance and seeking out information, seeking out potential. The other thing that she did was she made a deliberate choice to identify some resources, because Jane knew for herself that she couldn't do this by herself. Jane knew that what she wanted, she would need some support. And she went out and she found that. Listen to me, ladies, wherever you happen to be, do not think that because it is your dream that you have to do it by yourself. In this case, Jane went out and she got some support. She got support in a life partner. It was very methodical. She knew that she needed someone who valued education, someone who valued a certain moral compass, and someone who had a backbone. She went out looking for a man of substance, and she found him. She certainly found him, and they created a life together. She knew what she was looking for. That does not mean that her salvation, her saving grace was in this person, but she knew the attributes that she needed in that partner, and she went out and she got it. Identify the resources that you will need to help you get to where you want to get to, and go out there and find it. You need help. Identify where you need the help to come from and go out there and find that help. And third, Jane took action. One of the things that she shared that was so poignant, she said, no child of hers would be without an advocate, especially in school. No child of hers would be without an advocate. No one, especially at that time, no one was going to correct her children in a way that she did not agree with. No one was going to speak down to her children by virtue of Jane's history. You know, in smaller communities, people know people and people talk about people. What happens is if everybody knows Jane is poor and she came from nothing, the expectation was that Jane's children would also be poor and come to no good. Jane said that no one was going to label her children or limit them because of what is perceived to be their trajectory, what their options might look like because of Jane's own history. That was not going to happen. Jane decided to advocate for her children. I'll wrap this up pretty quickly because there's so much I could share about this story. But remember the three things that Jane did. She identified the outcome that she wanted. She wanted a better life for herself. She wanted a better life for her family that she would eventually have. Second, she identified the resources that she was going to need and she went out there and she found it. And third, Jane took action. She put her foot down and she started working. And when I say to you working, Jane had multiple jobs at various times in her career, in her working life. She did menial tasks sometimes because that's what was necessary to get the job done. Jane did what she had to do to get the outcome. She never actually stopped. And while she progressed, she was able to start working smarter and not so much harder. The truth is she never stopped working for the good of her family and for her desired outcome. Let me share with you part of the real life result of these three things, three steps that Jane took. Jane has been able to come to some measure of wealth. No, she's not Oprah Winfrey rich or Bill Gates rich. That's not it. But considering what Jane has come from, Jane is infinitely better placed right now financially than where she had come. And for that, I say, yes, big round of applause. She did the work though, and a lot of times it was not pretty, but she did it. So her wealth financially is way better than what she started with. Outcome achieved. The second thing, and this is something especially for the parents, and this was a big thing for Jane. Jane deposited so much into her family, into her children, that now she can bask in the wealth that her children have because her children now honor her with that wealth. Oh, I'm getting goosebumps. It was something fascinating to hear because not only did she acquire a measure of wealth for herself, but in exemplifying that tenacity, that deliberate choice, in exemplifying that drive to get things done and never falling away and saying this is too much or I can't do this or I won't do that. Jane was able to exemplify this for her family, and as a result, she has inspired another generation of awesome human beings. You should meet some of them. I have to say that in hearing this experience, I was both humbled and inspired. The last thing I want to say is this. Those of us who have had our Cinderella experiences, a lot of that experience may well be painful. A lot of that experience may well be less than ideal. I want to encourage you to share it. Not to put it on blast for the whole world. That's not what I'm talking about. I want to encourage you to use your story to inspire someone else. I want to encourage you to tell your story, not for anyone to feel sorry for you or give a handout. Please share your story with someone because somebody is dealing with something and they need to hear how you overcame. Doesn't mean that it's going to be the same for them. But I know when I heard that story, I had, first of all, I had a much different regard for this person. I had a much better regard for Jane. I looked at her with different eyes because the person I see now does not say anything about the person back then. And it told a different story. But when that was shared with me, I could absolutely say, wow, that was inspiring. You see, all around us are Cinderellas that have chosen, instead of being in a fairy tale, to get out and create the life of their dreams. We're all around you. I am one. And Cinderella Diaries is designed to help you get that story, get that inspiration, and share that with you so that you too can move up, you can move out, you can be blessed by the experiences of others. I hope that my very much abridged telling of Jane's story has been an inspiration to you, knowing that, yes, there are literal real life Cinderellas, knowing that the way we began does not have to be the way we end up, and knowing that the work that we put into changing our wealth and life stories will be worth it. You may not see it all right now in your face today or even tomorrow. It will pay off for you. What is holding you back? What resources do you need? How can I support you, or identify the support systems around you? What can we do to help you get to that real life, dream life? And you don't have to do it alone. Do not think that you have to do it alone. Whatever your beginning does not determine your end or your legacy. Your story is still being written. So please, I'm going to advocate, I'm going to beg you to, if you do have that Cinderella story, share it. And if you need that support, reach out for it. Every Cinderella has a story, and yours could be the one that someone else needs to hear. So as you journey through your wealth conversations, your wealth journey, as you journey through life, make the decision to deliberately step outside of the fairy tale that someone else wrote and actively create the life of your dreams. Thanks so much for being here today. Thanks so much for watching. I look forward to having conversations with you around this. And I'm hoping that next week I have a co-presenter who will share her own Cinderella story with you. I'm looking forward to that next Tuesday. So I will see you then. Thanks, everyone. Good night.